Welcome everyone, I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development for the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana, and we're here today for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. My guest today is a very busy man who I'm excited to have, Mike Busada. So Mike, thanks for being here.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we'll hop in on you. Let's start here today. You're extremely active in our community, serving on numerous boards, including the LSU Health Science Center Shreveport Foundation. If I mess up anything, just hop in. Shreveport-Bossier Military Affairs Council, Bossier Chamber of Commerce, and the Red River Valley Association. My first question for you is, who taught you the importance of service? And why do you care so much about this community?
I really think it was probably my grandfather, primarily, and then my dad and my family in general. When my grandfather came to Shreveport, he was from Massachusetts and moved down here, was stationed in Texas during World War II, and ended up in Shreveport, met my grandmother, and made this place home. And so all of my cousins in Massachusetts look at us as the very country cousins that have a weird accent. But when he got here and not knowing anybody, he immediately got involved in just a variety of different organizations.
And let me interrupt one. This is your
Yes.
grandfather on your dad's side?
It is,
Okay.
Busada.
Okay.
And just got involved in everything he could. And his mindset was, this is my home now, and I want to do everything I can to help make it better for, myself, my family, and my entire community. And that was something that he did until he passed away after 98 years or 99 years. And my dad has done the same thing, and my mom has been a tremendous supporter. And the same thing really on my mom's side of the family. And I don't know if it comes from the fact that my great grandparents immigrated to this country and
From where?
From Lebanon.
Okay.
And just felt like that you had an obligation to give back to the community, to be a part of the community. And so I've always enjoyed doing it. I like it, and it's something that I feel like it's essential if we want to have a place where we can raise our kids. And
tell me a little bit about, I know your dad, I know your uncle. Tell me a little bit about them. I don't have a specific question, but just give me a little background on them, what they've done, who they are, maybe names.
Sure. My dad, Barry, and his brother, Bruce, as well as my aunts, Jane and Judy, all were part of Diesel Driving Academy, which has been one of the largest commercial truck driving schools in this region of the country, and one of the top schools nationally. And one of the things that and that was something that my grandfather and another businessman here in Shreveport, Mayor Chastain, before he passed away, started and just continued to grow over the last 50 years. And so that, and then other, a lot of other business involvement, different business opportunities, Ayers Career College, which is training in vocational education and allied health. And so they really had a passion for education, and because you can see the benefits of it. You can see that each person that comes in your doors, when they leave, they're going out and they're doing something that really fulfills them, fulfills their family, and helps our community. And so, they really are passionate about their work, but also they've really reiterated and really pushed on the importance of getting involved and being, involved in your community, donating time, donating money, donating effort. And I'll never forget growing up, we were coming back from a trip and we had just landed in the airport. We were little, and somebody in the airport had made, in the Shreveport airport, had made a derogatory comment about the airport. And my dad just got viscerally mad about it. Didn't yell at the person or anything, but just, I remember him just saying, like, this is ridiculous that somebody's standing here in public criticizing your own city and continuing to demean your own city. Like, what are you going to do to help as opposed to criticize? And that always stuck with me.
And unlike a lot of people I know, I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe you're a family of four, and I believe 3 of your 4 siblings still are here.
Yes.
And what do you attribute that success to? Just because so many parents would be envious of Barry's situation. Sure. To have so many of his kids and grandkids here locally. Like, how did he pull that off when so many other families struggle with that here in Shreveport-Bossier?
Well, I think a lot of it is just instilling that pride in us and giving us something to really be proud of our community. I think a large part of it too is my mom, and my mom is somebody that really was just a super mom. I mean, was it everything, did everything, was always there, and continues to do it this day. I mean, I don't know that my wife and I, we have very busy jobs. I don't know without my mom's help and guidance and support that we could do everything that we are able to do and want to do. And so it's really just having that family here, and then having opportunities here. And that's one of the things that I think that we've got to focus more and more on. I do have one sister that doesn't live here, and who's in economic development.
Until recently.
She was here recently,
right?
And wants to move back, at some point in time. And so it's one of those things that once you see what else is out there, you realize how much we really have here. I mean, we all lived away for a short period of time. And I think all of us, when we were living in other places, realized that, how great the opportunity that we have here in Shreveport-Bossier, Northwest Louisiana. And so, I think when you talk to most people that have left and come back, or that have come here for the first time, tend to tell you the same thing. My wife's one of them. She's from Lafayette, and there's no bigger cheerleader for Shreveport-Bossier than my wife, and reminds me all the time, like, everybody here needs to be extremely proud. I mean, there's a lot to really be proud of here. And so I think that, people realizing that there's what we have is a really great thing is important.
I agree. All right, so let's get a little into your day-to-day. You're senior counsel for Butler Snow Law Firm. I believe your areas of expertise, which are a bit over my head, are bond finance and economic development financing law. For us lay people, which I put myself in that group, talk to me about who some of your clients are and the type of law work you typically focus on.
Sure. It's a very niche area of law that I didn't even know existed when I was in law school. And the easiest way to explain what I do is it's financing projects. And those projects can be everything from streets and roads and bridges to major manufacturing facilities, distribution facilities. For instance, Amazon is a client. And so, when we worked on a lot of their big economic development growth facilities around the state,
including the one
here.
Okay.
And then I work for a lot of local governments. So when it's come time to, again, build new infrastructure, roads, streets, bridges, to invest in other parks and in schools and all of the the things that are critical, and then hospitals as well.
And the actual municipality will be your client?
Yes. A lot of times the municipality will be the client, and we'll issue bonds, and we will use other economic development tools to provide incentives to be able to finance some of these projects. And so if it's just a true government infrastructure project, typically we utilize municipal bonds, and then sometimes we're able to utilize some tax credits that are available from the federal government. When it goes outside of just traditional projects, your basic things, your roads, your streets, your bridges, your libraries, and it comes to economic development projects, it comes to getting companies to come in here, when it comes to revitalizing certain areas of town, then those times will either represent the city itself or an economic development entity that just focuses on that. And then sometimes we represent the companies too. And so I've represented both sides, the government and the company, as well as the independent organizations. And so it really just kind of depends on what the need is. But it's something that, to me, has been an extremely gratifying area of law. And it's something, again, you talk to most people are like, what in the world do you do?
Including me, so thanks, that's helpful.
Sure.
All right, so you're a member of the Louisiana Committee of 100 for Economic Development. there are, and I went through the list, I counted this, there are less than 20 people from Shreveport-Bossier who sit on this important committee. Talk to me about some of the work of the Louisiana Committee of 100 for Economic Development. How often do you guys meet? Where do the meetings take place? And what type of work does the committee typically do?
Sure. And you mentioned the number of people, and that's one thing that we're trying to continue to get more people from this area. And so we just had a couple of new members that have just joined that I'm really excited about. They'll be at our meeting next week in Baton Rouge.
It's Suey, Rick Simpson, Grant Knuckles, and one more.
Edward Taylor.
Edward Taylor, right, exactly.
So excited. I mean, we really need to have more people. I mean, I lived and worked in Baton Rouge for, a combined amount. Baton Rouge, New Orleans for about 10 years. And, worked close to government in Baton Rouge, the Capitol, LSU, all of those things that are based in Baton Rouge. And I can tell you that one of the things that's more important than anything for our region is having people there, having people at the table. And it goes back to the old saying, 90% of life is just showing up. And so many times, it's easy to forget about us up here. And they're hearing, the leaders are always hearing from the people that live there. And so our voice doesn't always break through to the extent that we would like it to. So having more people from our area there, I think, is critical. And as far as what we're doing, one of the big things that we've done, we meet several times a year.
In Baton Rouge?
In Baton Rouge and in Washington
okay.
Are our two big meetings. And then we have some small meetings throughout the year, but those are our two real big meetings. And last year, we had a really big initiative, last year, I guess the year before that, called Reset Louisiana, the Reset Agenda. And we partnered with the Council for a Better Louisiana and the Public Affairs Research Council and really advocated for some basic common sense reforms, government reforms for our state government. Really to focus on bringing us, modernizing the way that our state operates, modernizing the way that our taxing structure is, modernizing the way that our education structure is. And so we worked for about 2 years with different candidates that were running for office, as well as those that are in the legislature. And we're able to have a significant amount of success in the past legislative session with getting some of the priorities addressed, especially with education, which is always one of the most critical issues.
Give me an example of maybe a piece of legislation that's new around education that has passed or been implemented.
One of the things was really putting a focus and investment on preschool, on pre-K education. All the studies show the difference that makes. I mean, it is just an astronomical difference if you do have that early education. We haven't had that available to the extent is widely available to anybody as we'd like. That was something that was pushed and really made significant advancements in the last session.
Some of this early childhood work from Community Foundation and from the City of Shreveport, there's an additional state component to that.
And to help them, and that's the thing. Thankfully we have, we've got great local organizations like the city, like the Community Foundation, that have stepped up and really filled just a massive hole that we've had in our educational system. And so the state now is recognizing the importance of that, and it's coming back and really providing reinforcements. And so just to help them continue that mission with the funding that's there, as well as working through our public schools.
Great. And when you sit on the Committee of 100, is there a term limit to that, or how's that work?
There's not. It's you get invited to participate, and then once you're on there, it really it's one of those things that you really have the ability to be as active as you want to be. It's something that we've got a past president of the Committee of 100 for Louisiana, Wayne Brown, who's still actively involved. I'll see him next week at our meeting. Who's really been a big promoter of Shreveport and Bossier, get more people involved. And over time, what I've noticed is whoever it really depends on who the president at any given time of the organization is, in terms of what the focus is like. The focus does change from time to time. One of the big things that we push every time we're there is making sure that we'll have the governor will be speaking to us next week. And is making sure that those issues that are important to this region are addressed. Things like I-49, things like the proper funding and full funding for our academic medical center and those things, and just making sure that that's in the conversation.
Is this a one-day meeting? Is this a all-day meeting, 2-day meeting?
This will be a one-day meeting.
All day?
About half a day. Half a day.
And I mean, if you can pull it up online, but if it's a powerful group.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a who's who of Louisiana in terms of representatives from all over the state who own very large businesses and are very important to the state's future.
Absolutely. No, it's a great group of people, and I just, the thing I'm most excited about too, one of the things that we have is we've got a cooperative endeavor agreement between the Committee 100 and Louisiana Department of Economic Development. And that's something that we continue to strengthen so that we can provide resources and collaborate to help to really help fill the gaps and really help both ensure that LED has all the local support that it needs from the different regions of the state, which is important.
Great. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for one of those meetings. It's got to be fascinating.
It is. It really is.
So let's shift to a little more local. This can be sort of a long question, but in a historic partnership, the Shreveport-Bossier Convention and Tourist Bureau, together with the City of Shreveport, the City of Bossier City, the Greater Shreveport Chamber of Commerce, the Bossier Chamber of Commerce, the Shreveport-Bossier African American Chamber of Commerce, and other local community organizations are working together to develop a destination master plan and community brand. While the Convention and Tourist Bureau has led the project and is funding the initiative, a steering committee with representatives from around the area has been organized to offer guidance and assistance. You're one of 16 people who sit on this steering committee. If you could, my question is, talk to me about the importance of this initiative and this project and where we are so far in the process.
Sure. I think this is probably one of the most critical things that we've done in a long time. And just to kind of go back a little bit, I mean, so much of my work deals with economic development. And one of the things that I've noticed, having worked in other places, and my firm is an international firm, and one of our biggest practice areas is this area of economic development, finance, and public finance in general. And one of the things that's very clear to me is that a lot of people talk about economic development, but we don't really look at it as kind of the art and science that it really is. And it's just like any other profession out there, where if you go to a doctor, if you go to a heart doctor, you're not going to ask him to operate on your leg. And you would never think to go to your lawyer and say, hey, can you do heart surgery on me? Whereas economic development, we always talk about it, but one of the things that I really think we can continue to build upon is making sure that we're bringing in people that have studied it, that have lived it, that have worked with both the companies and on the government side, that really understand it, because there is an art, there is a science, and it's one of those things. My expertise is not in sheer economic development, it is in the legal financing and how to finance those deals. So we're working with economic developers, and so I'll be the first to tell you that the importance of those people and the expertise, I think, is critical. And it goes to what we're doing with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, is bringing in experts that have worked with communities around the country and saying, look, we know what we think makes us stand out. We know what we like, what we dislike, but you've seen what works and what doesn't work everywhere else. And I'm a firm believer in somebody has done something well somewhere. And how do we go and take the best ideas and bring them back and mold them to meet our own specific needs? And so this brought in a phenomenal company that has represented major communities around the state, around the country that we've all heard of. And their success rate has been really tremendous. And in one city, I remember they mentioned in one of our first meetings, they did a poll of the city, of the residents of the city, and said, how many of you would recommend that a family member move to this city? And the response was 30%. I mean, pretty bad. After they went through the process, and it's not a short process. I mean, it's you'll have the product, but then implementing it takes several years. I mean, it's not something we're going to change overnight. But after about 4 or 5 years, they did the same poll. 76% of the people said they would recommend their family member move there.
Wow.
One of the highest in the country. And so what that tells me is, let's bring in experts, let's listen to them, and then let's utilize what they provide for us, and let's execute. And then the ultimate hope is that we build that ability, we build that capacity here to continue to build upon that locally without having to go out and bring anybody else, and we can continue to build upon that and do those things and build that economy here. So it's going to be exciting. It's really going to be two parts. It's going to be one focused on how do we get visitors to come into the community, whether it's for conventions or corporate meetings or whatnot. There's a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous amount of boost to the economy from those type of events. Also, most people, before they move to a community, they visit it first. And they visited, they went to a conference there, they went to a Little League baseball game there, they loved it, and they're like, hey, I can see myself living there. So when there's an opportunity, they're more willing to come. And so one is going to be really directed at that group. The other is going to be directed at just how do we brand our community? How, who are we? What are we proud of? What do we do? How do we encompass everything that's great into an overall plan? And it's not going to be just a logo and a tagline. It's going to be it's going to be a well thought out plan. And we're hoping that all the organizations in the city, whether it's the Chambers of Commerce, NLEP, BRF, Y, all the different organizations, the Community Foundation, the goal is for everybody to really adopt this. And everybody's been working on this, and really to take that and weave into their marketing and their branding this unified strategy of just making sure that we're all kind of have a cohesive message. They'll all be unique to the organization, but it'll all kind of have that base foundation. And so we've got so much to be proud of, and I think that this is a way to remind ourselves that we have a lot more than a lot of people realize. I mean, we have things here that people would literally give anything to have, and we just
talk to me about a few of those things, because I know you see a lot and you know a lot, and I've heard you articulate some of those things in about as clear a way as anyone I've listened to. There's three things that I think are really set us apart from anywhere, and will allow us to compete with anybody anywhere. We've got an academic medical center. With Oshner LSU, what LSU Health is doing is there's only around 105 in the country, and it produces the amount of research, development, new techniques, the people that come here from other places to receive medical care, and it benefits all of our healthcare system. That's why you see, Willis Knighton with, a significant presence, one of the largest hospital chains in the state, as well as the work that Chris's is doing, the First Shriners Hospital. All of these people, we've got world-class healthcare right here, and it's because of we've got an academic medical center. And what's one of the fastest growing industries in the country? Healthcare. And so all of that is really going to come from what's built in that incubator. And so really, taking advantage of that, being able to commercialize a lot more of the research and the development, a lot more clinical trials and different research. I mean, that's what really takes you from being, good to great. I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan for a wedding not too long ago, and their entire downtown is almost the entire downtown, the anchor for it is healthcare. It's all these healthcare companies, these research institutions, these healthcare innovators that are taking their products they're developing in the labs and they're turning them into commercial products, and they're building big companies, and it's revolutionized that city. And so I think that's something that we have here, and we can really grow on that. And if you go look at what they've done in Little Rock, is a great example. And you go look at other cities, the University of Alabama, Birmingham, I mean, it has been an anchor. So it's something I guarantee you there's not a mayor in this country that wouldn't give just about anything to get one of these academic research institutions. We've got one. And so really building upon that, putting the focus, getting what we deserve in terms of just the equal allocation of funds from the state. We've come a long way, over the last several years. Why it's important to be in Baton Rouge to make sure that we're getting that allocation of funds. So that's a huge area, and that really is one of the most important things that we can really focus on. The other is we've got one of 10
major commands, Air Force major commands, headquartered right here at Barstow Air Force Base. What they're doing there, they're 2/3 of the nuclear triad, so they're critical for national defense. But the other key part of that is I was at a conference, a national security forum, and the secretary of the Air Force basically said, look, one of the things that we've made the determination of is that technology is moving so fast and it's changing so fast, especially when you start looking at space and what the Space Force is doing. And the old way of doing things that really made us successful in the last century don't necessarily work now, because to build for instance a satellite system, there's a proprietary satellite system, can take 10 years if it's done internally, whereas you can go to the private sector and you can get it done in 1/10 of that time. Used to, it was more beneficial to take the longer time because you had all the secrets, you had you had everything right there. So it was yours. Now that just won't keep up with the pace of advancement. And so what they've done, and what he said that the Air Force will do especially, is partner with private companies to really develop cutting-edge research, cutting-edge technology that's going to protect our nation and our allies. And that can all be done here. And that's something we have the ability to take those opportunities and expand. San Diego, there was no San Diego until the military was there. The military really built San Diego. And there's a documentary Marcus Lemonis did, and it was phenomenal what they did, and it was just because businesses surrounded it and they developed and they grew. And so that's something that we really need to continue to focus on. I know BRF is doing a lot of work in that area. On the education side, you've got Cyber Innovation Center, and Strike Works. So really just capitalizing on that is just a huge opportunity. And again, what's one of the top fastest growing sectors? Information technology. So we've got information technology and healthcare. And then the third one is transportation and logistics. And how do you get stuff from point A to point B? COVID underscored the importance of that. We saw with the supply chain issues, you're going to see more and more manufacturing. I'm getting more calls now from companies that want to build facilities in the United States, manufacturing facilities, reshore that stuff. And we are in a geographically prime location. Where we are in the country is our community. We've got interstate systems that run north, south, east, and west and intersect here. We've got Class A rail that runs north, south, east, west, intersects here. We've got a river that can get to the Mississippi River. So we've got everything that a company in logistics wants. It's no coincidence that Amazon built where they built it. And I'm not telling you anything private or not. It's just as a consumer, wow, it makes sense. Why would you build it? And I think there's a lot more opportunities. One of the things that we haven't done, though, is really taking advantage of it to the extent that we could. Some of that's because in Louisiana, we don't have some of the aggressive economic development tools that they do in states like Texas and Mississippi, for that matter. But I think we're getting there.
What kind of tools? When you say aggressive economic, what are we talking about? Tax breaks, tax incentives, or something?
A mix. For instance, in Texas, each community has the ability to pass their own individual sales tax that's used just for economic development. And so when we're competing against Longview, Texas, for instance, there's not a whole lot of difference between the two in terms of, you're talking about an hour and a half distance. So you're not really, there's no huge reason to go to one over the other, except for the fact that in Longview, they've got funds for economic development that they can go out and they can provide incentives, they can go out and market their sites, they can go out and develop sites that we don't have the same ability to do at the same level in Louisiana, or not nearly as easily. And so, if you look at the Chamber of Commerce in Longview, Texas, that may have, several $1 million versus our equivalent of an LEP that gets about $1 million and covers, 20 parishes, 12.
Covers a lot of the state.
And so that's one of the things. And it's not just all about incentives, but it's about how do you get out there and prepare an environment that makes people want to come here. And people all the time say, well, I don't like incentives. We shouldn't have to give anything away. I agree with you, as long as everybody else doesn't do it too.
Right.
It's kind of like, nuclear weapons. We all agree, we don't like nuclear weapons, but we're not going to give ours away unless everybody else gives theirs up. It's one of those things. And so, but our incentives need to be smarter. And we've got some outdated incentive models that really don't, it's one size fits all. We're going to give you everything or give you nothing, and you might not need everything, but we're going to give it to you anyway because it's cookie cutter, it's easy. And so that's one of the things that we're really working on. We worked in the legislature. NLEP really was a leader on this, creating the state's first mega site development program, which is something that we've been sorely lacking in. We don't, until this past year, Louisiana provided no money for the use of developing mega sites. Mega sites are about 1,000-acre sites,
okay,
where you see these big manufacturers, especially big car manufacturers, that are just gigantic, enormous job creators. And so we've never had that. Mississippi, by contrast, will put $30 million a year into developing these sites. Louisiana has never had anything. I was honored to work for NLEP to create the law and write the law that created this program. And one of the things we did was we said that the money that's going to it has to be spent equally around the state. So Northwest Louisiana is going to get just as much as any other area of the state. We put that in the law. There were people that wanted to take it out. We fought. We kept it in there. It's in the law forever. But we got an initial $8 million. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what other states do. But we're getting there. And the reason that's so important is these big companies, every month is equivalent to millions of dollars, in revenue, lost revenue or generated revenue. So when they're coming and looking, where am I going to build a new facility? They want to go somewhere that's ready. They want to go, it's like buying a new house. You can go buy a fixer-upper, and some people love to do that. But then there are other people like, I don't have time for that. I've got another kid on the way. I've got to have a house now, and I don't have 6 months to go mess around with that. I want something I can move into immediately. And that's what a lot of these companies are looking at. They're like, they want something that's ready, that's already clear, that the roadways are already there, that the rail lines, any additional rail lines are there, that it has access to, fiber optic cable. All of those things that are in there. And that's something that this program, for the first time, will allow us to do. It will also allow us to market those sites, to basically say, look, we've done all this, we've got this site ready to go, now let's go market it to these big companies. And that makes you extremely attractive. My firm, one of our wholly owned subsidiary, Vision First Advisors, is a nationally recognized economic development consulting firm, and put together one of the studies, the market studies, that allowed Tennessee to get just this $2 billion Ford EV facility, which is going to spin off and have another $2 billion battery creating facility. You're talking about 6,000 jobs. That's something we could have here. There's no reason we can't have that here.
And that's the kind of thing that changes a community.
That's the thing. And people, to me, when it comes to economic development too, you're in one of two spots. You're either in the spot like Nashville. It's like, now everybody wants to go to Nashville. But Nashville's just a small country town 40 years ago. And so they realize, okay, we're not going to get people to come to Nashville instead of going to, let's say, Dallas right now, because Dallas is hopping. We've got to do something enticing. We've got to give them something different, something unique. And that comes in the form of tax incentives. That comes in the form of labor development, labor training, and different programs, different support. And you lure them in. Once you lure them in, you start building critical mass, and then you don't have to give as much in terms of incentives. Then you start having the snowball effect. Everybody wants to be where everybody is, and so we've really got to figure out how do we create an environment to get people here where it may be easier to go somewhere else, but they see that long term it will be better for them. And that's what we really need to be focusing on as much as possible is how do we tell somebody, yeah, you can go to Dallas and build your company in Dallas. It's going to be a higher property taxes. You're going to pay higher wages, but you're also going to have a lot of these benefits, all these things that are built in there. You've got a well-established, all these things. We may not have some of those things, but you're also going to be able to come here a lot cheaper. And if we get you here cheaper, that money you save can be reinvested by not only the community, but and by the business to basically get those things, to fill in that backfill with what we don't have initially. And you're going to be on the ground floor. You're going to be in here, and you're going to get everything locked up when things are still cheap, when you still are the dominant player. And so then 10 years from now, you're going to have saved a significant amount of money and been much better off than you would have if you'd gone into, an area that's already booming. And it's, it's just like anything else in business or a neighborhood. You can go to a neighborhood that's already long established and pay a lot. You get a lot, but you can say, I think this neighborhood is going to be the next big thing. I'm going to go move out there right now where I can get in early. And that's how all these cities develop. And it's one of those things that, all the big cities that we look at and say they're the most successful cities, they were once where we were. And they just decided, let's try something different, let's try something new, and let's get people here.
And we're doing that.
We are. And we're making a lot more progress. I think that you're seeing a lot more collaboration. I think you're seeing a lot more desire to really utilize expertise of different people that really have that expertise. And so I think when you're looking at folks that have been brought in, and I say brought in and developed here, I mean people that have been put in positions to do economic development and to do community development are really now being given the latitude to be able to really go out and do some of those things. There's more openness to doing some of those things, and so I think that's really critical. And I think that in Shreveport on this side of the river, we've got a mayor's election coming up. I think we've got Bossier. Obviously, we've got a recent, I say new mayor. I guess it's been 2 years. So I mean, you're seeing some change, and so I think anytime there's change, it's an opportunity to really take advantage of that and to try something different. And so,
well, it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I've got two more questions for you. My first is kind of being a little more cynical. In your opinion, what's holding us back? What's holding us back from being one of the next great small cities in America, aside from everything you just mentioned?
I think one of the things is a reluctance to recognize, and we talked about this earlier, a reluctance to recognize the resources that we do have and really capitalize on what we have. So I think that's one big thing. And I think the other thing is, how do we build more intellectual capacity? How do we build more workforce capacity? And one of the ways, one of the things that you see is so many people have moved away, and people continue to move away, and they take with them all their talent, all of their knowledge. And so many times you come in and we say, well, let's find somebody local to do this, and the response is, well, we don't have anybody local that can do this. Sometimes that's right, sometimes that's wrong. More often than not, that's wrong. But if that is correct, how do we create that here? How do we create some of the top financial experts here? Let's just use that industry. Let's use the financial industry. It's outside of my purview because mine's law. Let's use financial. How do we build those type of jobs here? Because that's one of those areas where you've got a lot of people coming out of school with finance degrees, economics degrees. How do we build that economy here? And to me, we've got to think beyond what we've done in the past. We've got to say, okay, we don't have this expertise here. We want to develop this expertise here. So when we utilize these other companies, we're going to tell them we want you to apprentice, to work with somebody locally, somebody's qualified, somebody that's gone through, somebody's got the education, that's done all the things they have to do. All they need is the experience piece. They've done everything else and been successful. We want you to partner with them, but not just to put their name on a sheet of paper, not just to say, well, I've got somebody local. That does no good. We want it to be where that person is getting to learn. That person's actually getting to participate and to understand and really get their hands dirty. That means the company, whoever's training them, the big company, they're going to lose some money on the deal, because they're going to have somebody that's never done this before that's going to make some mistakes, but they're going to learn it. And that allows one of two things to happen. Either this large company creates a major presence in the city and has a major footing in the city, which is great. So those people are here, they're local, they're being paid here, they spend their money here. Or those local folks say, okay, I've learned it, now I want to branch out on my own and do my own thing and have my own company. Yes, it's a competitor, but competition is good. And most big companies welcome that. I know ours, we are, like I said, an international law firm. We welcome, if there's an opportunity to get to train and to work with and help teach, somebody the area of law I do, we're all about that. If they decide to go out and start their own firm afterwards, that's fine. Because my area of practice, and this is something that is, I realize, the only way you can learn this, and you can talk to anybody. I'm on the National Association of Bond Lawyers. I'm a national committee chair. You go talk to anybody in these industries, they'll tell you, some of these more niche areas, the only way you can actually learn to be successful is going and working for somebody that's already doing it. And so when I moved to Shreveport, I looked around, there was nobody that did this. And the only way that anybody could learn it is to go live in Baton Rouge or live in New Orleans, and basically just say, I'm going in, I'm just going to learn this. So I want to be able to provide that opportunity.
And that's what you did.
Yeah. And that's what you had to do, because you had to have somebody that was willing to take you in, lose money on you, because you were going to do it wrong the first 20 times, and they were going to have to redo it and show you how you did it wrong, and you learn, and you eventually learn. And so, that's something I want to be able to do and to provide for people in my community, to be able to say, hey, you don't have to go to Baton Rouge to learn this if you want to learn it. And the same thing, whether you're looking at the financial industry, whether you're looking at healthcare, we need to make sure architects, engineers, all of those jobs, those 21st century jobs, where we may not have the capacity yet, how do we build that capacity here? And it's got to go beyond just saying, well, just check a box and have somebody on your payroll that's local. It's got to go beyond that. It's got to go, how can you empower and educate somebody here for the long term?
And how do you incent the people that are taking on these apprentices, for lack of a better word? How do you motivate people in your, you have a community spirit, you have a heart for this, but how do you motivate other people in your shoes to take on people and to provide that experience and provide that knowledge?
Sure. I think it's smart business. I think it's really smart business to make sure that you are helping train, and again, some of those people may leave and compete against you, but that's just part of it. It's always better to have a stronger, whatever type of community you're in. So if you're in healthcare, it's always better to have a stronger healthcare community if you're a doctor. You want to have the best doctors, even if some of them are competing against you. Look what MD Anderson does. People go to MD Anderson because that's where the best doctors are. Not because there's one good doctor. That's where all the best doctors are when it comes to, cancer treatment. That's their pitch. That's what they do. And so you want to have as many of those people here. So I think it's important, and I think it's smart from a business perspective. And I think from the government perspective has a really big opportunity to have an impact and basically say, look, when it comes to vendors for the government, which are typically very large contracts, we're going to move beyond some of the basic measurements. We're going to say we really want to see a full apprenticeship program, and we're going to measure that. And
we're not going to award a contract to you unless you're meeting these requirements.
Right, and we're going to develop ways to determine whether or not the people that are being hired in these positions to learn are actually getting to learn. Are they getting to learn, or are they just being put in a side room saying, hey, just stay over there. We just need your name, and we're going to pay you, and we're not going to let you learn a thing. So we have to, and that stuff's complicated. It's not easy to come up with ways to measure that by any stretch, but we've got to do it, because if not, we're going to continue to outsource, and the more that we outsource, the harder it is for us to build our economy. And I think from a global level, we learned that during COVID, that the outsourcing can be very problematic, and it's no different from a local standpoint. We can't continue to outsource all of this work, and it's everything. It's not just, I named some more of the office jobs. I mean, it's everything. It's from top-notch electricians, top-notch plumbers, educators. Teachers. I mean, it's all of those things. How do we develop that here, and how do we incentivize that?
Okay. And on the flip side, and my final question for you, we may keep talking a little bit, but what makes you, as you look around, I mean, in addition to everything you've mentioned, as you look around, what makes you optimistic about the future of this community? What do you see that gives you hope or makes you feel like this is all trending in the proper direction?
I think, one, just economics are starting to work in our favor. I think that you're starting to see a lot of big cities that have been very big, bustling cities for a long time. Companies are starting to look there and say, wait a second, it's too congested here. Fighting for the talent is driving up wages so much that they're just, you can't justify them anymore. We've got quality of life. There's quality of life issues. People want to be more in a place where they can, less traffic, where they can raise their kids. So I think, and we're perfectly primed for that. My sister lives in Phoenix and works in economic development in Phoenix. And, Phoenix, so much of their traffic is really coming from, Phoenix was not that big of a city years ago. And so much of their traffic is people that have looked for other big cities and said, we want an alternative. We like what our current city has to offer, but all of this extra stuff that's grown up, we want something, that's a little bit cleaner in terms of less traffic, less congestion. And so they're looking for other places to go. And so I think that we're a prime location for that. And I think our proximity to Texas, I think, is actually really beneficial in this area, because I do think that we can really start to market ourselves as, hey, in this community you can get anywhere in 10 minutes. We've got a great infrastructure system. We've got a lot of amenities, and we're very, we're centrally located. So I think you're seeing towns our size are starting to really grow tremendously. And so if we take advantage of it, I think that's one thing that's just there. Now, how do we speed that up? I think that, what we're seeing in, number one, from our entities. I mean, we've got a lot of great organizations for the first time, at least in the last decade that I can think of. Everybody seems to be working together. Everybody seems to be saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is my lane. Let's all work together and collaborate, especially on the economic development front. From what I'm seeing, everybody's tending to all work together in the same direction. And I think that we've developed some great talent here, and we're building some more talent here, which I think is going to be important. And then the growth at the medical school. I mean, I think that is something that is tremendous. The new medical education building is going to be absolutely world class. A $60 million facility. It's going to be world class. It's going to be something that is going to drive not only more research through the Center for Viral Emerging Threats, which was a major player when it came to COVID, but it's also going to help us increase our medical school size and really recruit more students here, as well as more top-flight doctors. We've gotten the number of new doctors that have come over that have brought with them NIH funding, National Institutes of Health funding, to do research here has increased significantly. And so I think that is going to really, and so if that piece, and then I know that there's a big push for many of our leaders, people like Representative Presley and others that have really pushed to expand LSU, our four-year institution's presence. I know President Tate has expressed his strong commitment to build LSUS into a true four-year research institution, which we're one of the only major cities in Louisiana that doesn't have that major four-year research institution with everything that goes along with it, and that includes sports and all of those things, because that all is how you recruit students and keep students. So I think that commitment is huge, and so those things, I think that, again, Barksdale is going to continue to expand. They've got additional funding to expand their use there, so they're going to be doing some big things at Barksdale. And I really feel like if we continue to push on our transportation logistics, we continue to do those things. I mean, I think everything's really coming together. What's going on at the port? And that was the other piece on the transportation logistics is the port. I mean, the port is just a phenomenal tool and does great work. So it seems like all the pieces are starting to come together. And so I think it's just going to take everybody staying focused and moving forward. But I'm more optimistic now than honestly I've ever been. And you know, I'm not just saying that, but I really feel like things are starting to move. And the question is going to be whether or not we want to take advantage of it, and whether or not we're willing to take calculated, smart risk. And not so much, when I say risk, are we willing to lose? Are we willing to risk losing? And I think for a long time, the answer to that probably hasn't always been yes. It's, well, if we do that, what if it fails? What if this doesn't work? And we've got to be willing to say, you know what, this may work, this may not work, but we got to start doing it. We got to give it a try.
Well, Mike, I wish I could just sit here all day with you, because, I mean, anyone listening to this has to be optimistic and hopeful about our community and what lies ahead. So I appreciate all you're doing. I know you're in the trenches working hard, and you're certainly one of the bright spots of our community. I really appreciate you and appreciate you making the time. Is there anything else we haven't covered or anything else you'd like to mention today?
The only thing I'd say, and I'd just be remiss if I didn't say this because I think it's so important, because it's the one thing here that we've been slow to fully utilize. And it's something that I think we're starting to utilize, but I know there's going to be people that are questioning, pushing back, and is really utilizing all the tools at our disposal that our state does allow for economic development and for financing economic development projects and incentives. And when it comes to incentives, you know, an incentive is a tool. A tax incentive is a tool. Tools, you know, a hammer's a tool. A hammer is absolutely required to build a building, but it's also used to destroy things. So, you know, a hammer's not good or bad. An incentive is not good or bad. It's how do you utilize the incentives. And we have underutilized the tools in our belt for a long time. And I noticed that when I worked in Baton Rouge, and I realized that we were utilizing these tools to develop some really big, successful projects and do some major redevelopment. And I noticed that none of that was, to the same extent, was happening at home. And when I moved back, one of the things I realized is that, you know, there wasn't anybody, you know, there were no big firms here, just from the legal standpoint, but on a lot of different areas that had that expertise into, like I said, niche areas. So
it was, in your opinion, it was less a philosophy against these tools and more just an awareness that they even existed.
Yeah, and we outsourced most of that for out of necessity. I mean, there was nobody, you know, there's only about 2 or 3 firms in the state that even do it, because it's one of those practice areas where things go up and things go down. And so you have to have kind of a big firm financially, and a lot of firms have gotten out of it. So like, you know, when things are good, but when things are bad, you know, so that's why the bigger firms have been successful at doing it, because they can deal with those market fluctuations. So I noticed that most of what we were doing, we were having to rely on attorneys out of Baton Rouge or New Orleans. And so we were getting some of the information, but it wasn't the cutting edge stuff. It wasn't the complicated stuff. It was like, okay, well, this is the basic cookie cutter stuff. And I don't think it was malicious. I mean, well, I know it wasn't malicious. It was because there was nobody here. When you live in a community, you understand what's needed and what's not needed. When you don't live somewhere, it's kind of like, I'm gonna wait for somebody to call me. You know, if they call me, I can help them. But having people in the community that can say, look, I've seen this done here. You know, Justin Dixon at NLEP is a great example. I mean, somebody that has been on the commercial, industrial real estate side, has worked in economic development. You know, having somebody live here that's got that experience that can say, oh, I just read this in the paper. I see y'all are trying to do this. Did you know that I saw this done somewhere else, and this is how they did it, and let me put it all together. There's just something, you can't replace that. And so part of it, I think, was just having the information. Another part of it was we had tried some of these things and they weren't successful. And I would argue it was because they weren't, it was a tool that wasn't used properly. So we gave a tax incentive away, but we had no strings attached to it. We had no performance requirements. We had no clawback features. We had no safety mechanisms. And then when it didn't work, it's like, oh, well, we can't ever do this again. And I think that's the wrong, I think we learned some wrong lessons. I think the problem was not that we got involved and we were proactive. The problem was, how do we do this in a way that is going to provide the safety and security while still allowing us to compete? And, specific example, I know this was, one of the things, and look, in full disclosure, I have had no conversations with the company that's talking about doing some of the fairgrounds. I mean, I've had no conversation with them. I don't know them, wouldn't know if they walk in the door. But one of the things that, and I know some people think it's a great idea, some people think, well, let's do this downtown. I mean, there's a lot of different things. And one of the things that I would just tell people, anytime somebody comes to you want to do something, is there are certain things that you can require that they provide in order to make sure that, one, they have the ability to do what they're promising. And there's a way to provide incentives that they only receive once they do what they've promised to do. And there's ways to provide those incentives utilizing funds that were generated by them. And so there's ways to do these things, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't do that. I mean, this isn't, my point is, as we continue to move forward, those are the choices we're going to have to make as a community, and we've got to make sure that we're willing to go out there. And the way I'm talking about these incentives, a good example is, if the company isn't successful, there's no loss to the community because they don't get anything unless they actually achieved what they said they were going to achieve. So if they fail, they fail. A lot of companies fail, but we don't lose anything if they fail. We can't be scared and say, oh, well, that one failed, so we should never do it again. As long as we're not losing, as long as we're not risking the community's dollars, and the only thing that we're losing is just a little bit of pride because this one lost, we need to be doing that, because most people will tell you in business, out of every, 10 deals, one of them worked really well. And so we've got to have that attitude that, some of these aren't going to work. Every business person I know operates like that. We need to operate like that as a community, and I think that we can, and I think that people will get behind those things. So anyway, that's my last little piece. I wanted to make sure, just because I've heard so much of that lately. Well, we tried that once and it was a disaster. Well, you used a hammer once and the building wasn't built right, but did you have the right engineers and architects, and did you use the right nails, and was the lumber right? Like, just because you used the hammer doesn't mean and it didn't work, doesn't mean the hammer's always bad.
No, I'm glad you added that. I think it's invaluable. So thank you. Thank you for everything. Great to have you.
And thank you for what y'all are doing. I just, again, what the Y is doing in this community, and especially over the last, the expanded mission. I mean, I know y'all have hosted not only these podcasts, hosted a lot of community events, a lot of informational sessions, and I just think those opportunities are so critical for people just to be able to come out, to learn, to listen. And so what y'all done, not only in the beautiful facilities that are being developed everywhere, but also in building a sense of community, I think is just absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mike.
You bet.